Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Look, if you've been feeling completely, utterly burnt out by modern information overload, if you feel like you're constantly sprinting on a treadmill just to keep up with endless streams of professional advice, data, and new skills, well, I actually have some incredibly good news for you. It is not your fault. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework called the theory of generational informational exchange. It proposes that, yeah, we are absolutely in the middle of a unique, high-pressure informational crisis right now. But wonderfully, it also predicts a brilliant renaissance waiting for humanity just a few generations down the line. We're going to take a structured look at exactly how human mental capacity is evolving across 6 distinct generational stages.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with the overload crisis facing us today, then trace the shift from a linear past to a viral present and uncover the biological mismatch that's literally breaking our brains. After that, we'll look at the generational echo effect before finally exploring the 2010s renaissance. Let's jump right in.
All right, Part 1, the overload crisis and the active 2020s workforce. So let's identify the immediate pain point impacting professionals today. We are experiencing a historically unprecedented moment, guys. For the literal first time in history, we're facing this intense, non-stop informational pressure. As professionals right now, we are greedily absorbing knowledge from a million different directions at once. It's basically like trying to drink from a fire hose while juggling. Now, on paper, sure, that sounds like optimizing, but the reality? This massive volume of data is actually breaking our cognitive engines. We're trying to process an influx of highly variable knowledge that we simply were not designed to handle all at once.
And the really crucial point here is that this intense pressure doesn't just politely clock out when you leave the office. It manifests in severe, real-world fallout. Because of this overwhelming cognitive load, huge chunks of today's workforce are in crisis. We're seeing widespread mental health struggles. We're seeing career development issues where people feel completely stuck despite consuming endless podcasts and professional advice. There are profound social adaptation difficulties, and honestly, perhaps most notably, severe challenges when it comes to starting and building a family. The mental capacity required just to survive daily in this information hurricane leaves precious little energy for, well, anything else.
Moving right along to Section 2, Linear Past to Viral Present, where we look at the velocity of knowledge. To really understand our current crisis, we have to look backward at the generations immediately before us and just how fast the velocity of knowledge changed. Think about Generation 1, the pre-internet professionals. For them, social networks were not a native or even familiar concept. Knowledge transfer was strictly linear. You learned from a mentor, a physical textbook, maybe a direct manager. It was paced. It was manageable. But then, incredibly quickly, came Generation 2, the early influencer era, and this brought the sudden rise of accessible influencer professionals. Almost overnight, top-tier expertise became wildly accessible and totally viral. The floodgates opened, and that set the stage for the pressure cooker environment that we, Generation 3, are currently trapped in today.
Which brings us to Section 3, the biological mismatch, or basically why our brains are actively breaking.
So, you might be wondering, if having access to this incredible wealth of knowledge is supposedly a good thing, why is it actually hurting us? Well, the core thesis of the source material points out something fundamental. We simply lack both the biological and the social prerequisites to extract actual benefit from such constantly shifting knowledge. It aligns perfectly with this brilliant quote from E.O. Wilson. He said, "The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." We are wielding devices that deliver infinite expertise right to our pockets, but guys, our brains are essentially still running on Paleolithic hardware.
We can ground this biological limitation in a scientific concept called evolutionary mismatch. This happens when traits that originally helped us survive suddenly become harmful because the environment changed way too fast. In our linear past, our brains evolved to relentlessly seek out new information, because back then, new information literally meant survival. But today, in a hyper-connected digital world, that exact same biological drive just forces us to greedily consume endless streams of data. And that leads straight to cognitive overload and late-night doom scrolling.
And to make matters worse, this is all compounded by the paradox of choice. Having an endless array of directions for your career and personal development requires a massive amount of cognitive effort just to decide what to focus on. It's Netflix paralysis, but for your entire professional life. Instead of empowering us, this abundance actually paralyzes the modern workforce.
You spend so much energy trying to figure out the optimal path from thousands of different influencers that you just end up exhausted and fundamentally unsatisfied with whatever choice you actually do make.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 4, the generational echo effect, and what this means for the next generations.
We really have to look at the downstream echo of this crisis. If Generation 3, us, is currently depleting all our cognitive reserves just to stay afloat, what happens to the children we're raising? Let's trace this timeline. We start with the active 2020s workforce. Because they're absorbing so much pressure, they've severely depleted mental capacity left over for parenting. Now, this doesn't mean everything is terrible, but it does mean that Generation 4, the 2020s birth generation, will likely be a generation of ordinary people, simply because raising exceptional, boundary-pushing minds requires a surplus of mental energy that parents today just do not have. Then comes Generation 5, the inertia generation, who will continue to struggle partially just from the ongoing momentum and societal fatigue inherited from the generations right before them.
There is an incredibly fascinating observation from the source material regarding this echo effect, and it's basically the math behind a genius. The theory notes that creating an exceptional mind requires baseline mental capacity from the parents. Essentially, to raise one whole genius, it takes two half-geniuses. Because that parental mental capacity is being entirely depleted during these middle echo generations, we are facing a multi-generational lull in monumental breakthroughs. Humanity basically has to take a collective breather to process the informational shockwave of the internet era.
Finally, Section 5, the 2011s Renaissance. Let's talk about stabilization and recovery. Because the timeline doesn't end with exhaustion, it actually ends with a massive breakthrough. The theory proposes that it'll take until this sixth stage, the 2110s Renaissance, for humanity to finally adapt. And what a relief to think about. Generation 6 will be the very first group to have fully metabolized the viral data flow that broke their ancestors. They'll be the first generation in over a century to be informationally, career-wise, and socially stabilized. The evolutionary mismatch resolved. They won't be paralyzed by the paradox of choice. They will know exactly how to intuitively filter and utilize the godlike technology at their fingertips.
And just think about what that stability unlocks. When this beautifully stabilized Generation 6 reaches their most fruitful, productive years, they won't be wasting all their energy fighting burnout or mental health crises born of information overload. Instead, they'll use their preserved mental capacity to spark massive, positive new revolutions. The source predicts profound breakthroughs in science, entirely new paradigms in politics, and a huge leap forward for society as a whole. The foundation we are painfully laying down today will literally be the launchpad for their absolute renaissance.
Which brings us to our final thought. We are the bridge. The pressure you feel today isn't some personal failure on your part. It's a generational growing pain as humanity adapts to a radically new informational ecosystem. So I leave you with this. Will you learn to manage your own information diet today to help build the foundation for the renaissance of tomorrow? Guard your mental capacity, guys. It matters so much more than you know. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning out there.